Hello and welcome to today's demonstration. My name is Michalec and I'm on the worldwide technical sales team for BPM and decision management at IBM. Today we're going to be talking about operational decision management. And to tell this story, I want to take you through an evolution of decision management platforms. And this evolution is not just based on time, but also based on levels of maturity of implementations. Now to tell this story, we're going to use three main interfaces. The first is what you see on the screen now, which is our demonstration website. And this is going to enable us to interact with the decision management platform as if it were a real-world solution. The second is our Decision Center Enterprise Console, which is where much of the creation and maintenance of the rules will take place, as well as the much-needed governance, simulation, and deployment capabilities. And third is the Decision Center Business Console, which is the key component in the new offering from IBM. Now, for those of you that might be familiar with this demonstration or seen it in the past, either from IBM or from iLog, I want to encourage you to stay with us because we're going to cover much of the new capabilities using the Business Console later in the demonstration. Now let's get on with the demo. As you see on the screen, we have a website representing an online insurance company looking to offer quotes to its customers. Now the first part of the demo is going to cover the first level of maturity in decisioning platforms, which we call execution. Now, execution is not unique to decisioning platforms. In fact, many decisions can be made and executed without a decisioning platform. However, there's a very important tipping point where decisioning platforms are going to be required to handle the performance, reusability, and maintenance load of a decisioning environment. As we look at this demonstration, we're going to first issue a quote and request a quote as a customer. So I'm going to click on the Start Quote button, and we'll see that some information has been filled out for us, including many details about the driver. And this is important because there's many pieces of information that are going to be input to this decision when we request our quote. So in this example, I'm acting as Cindy Davis, a 22-year-old female from New Jersey, looking to get car insurance. I'll move on to the next step, where we will enter our vehicle information. And again, more information is being inputted. We can see some vehicle details. And the next step is going to be choose our coverage options. And you can see there's many different options to choose from. And I'm going to go ahead and click the submit and leave the defaults. And I'm going to receive a quote. In this case, around $352 is my per 6-month period. And I have many other details below, such as liability, comprehensive, collision. And within these, there's many granular details. Base premium, $48, and my surcharge of 3% for sedan cars. Now this is the execution part, and this could happen in the website code. This could happen in an externalized Java application. But in this example, clearly we are using the decision management platform to drive these values. Now, one of the important tipping points for execution is the level of data that's going to be inputted into that platform. So, for example, if we are only basing our quote on the age of the driver and the year of the vehicle, then we could probably get away with coding that in the website itself. But as you see, more and more information, more and more details come through, we're going to need a more sophisticated decisioning platform to handle these requests. Now I want you to remember $48 and 3% because we're now going to take a look at the rules that are driving these values to the website, which brings us to level 2 of maturity for decisioning platforms, which is externalization. Externalization is very important, especially in applications where the life cycle of change for the source application and the rules are different. So for example, if we are changing quotes or changing different rules that are driving these to the website, and even for seasonal rules or for small changes, we wouldn't want to redeploy the website and wait for that release schedule in order to apply those rules immediately. Now to do that in our platform, we're going to look at the Decision Center Enterprise Console. I'm going to log in as myself, Jared. We'll take a look at the main project environment. And I can manage many different rule projects or decision projects from this environment. I can also manage different versions. Now, branching is one topic that we'll cover in a moment. But in this case, I'm going to work on the main branch, which is our deployable branch. You can see along the left-hand side, we have a very intuitive folder structure to organize the rules, which is completely customizable. We can also associate user controls around these different rules. I'm now going to take a look at the comprehensive folder where we have our sedan surcharge. And this is where that 3% is coming from. So because I wanted a quote for a sedan, this 3% surcharge was automatically applied to my rule. Now this is a natural language rule, something we call business action language, and it's very customizable, and the vocabulary and verbalization of the different components, the data, and the rules is completely customizable and can be unique depending on the user or the environment. Now the second rule that we're going to look at is a decision table. So within my comprehensive pricing table, I can take a look at where the $48 is coming from. So looking at this table, I can see all my base premiums being applied, and this is based on the vehicle value and the deductible that I chose. In this case, it was a $40,000 car. I chose the $1,000 deductible, and therefore $48 was what came in the quote. So these are just two examples of the rules that are driving those values out to the website, and you can see that just these two rules alone are adding a lot of sophistication to our decisioning. Now the third example, the third level of maturity that I want to show is real-time deployment. So let's imagine that I now need to change that $48 quote and perhaps increase it slightly because I don't think I'm making enough money off these premiums. So I've changed it to $52, and I can now save that rule and deploy it immediately to the execution environment. You can see it's been saved as 52. Now let's go deploy it. Now the deployment has many different options. I can choose to set baselines. I can increment version on the rule sets. In this case, I'm going to replace the current version just to keep it simple. And it's going to go through a very quick deployment cycle. Now, as soon as that gives me a positive result, that rule is active. So in real life, we would probably have a life cycle associated with this, and we'd have an approval process and a promotion process. But you can see the flexibility and the ability to deploy those rules in real time is there. So let's go back to our website and reissue the quote. So I'm going to just walk through this quickly again and leave the same values that I had before for Cindy Davis, the same vehicle. I'll leave the same coverage options and request my quote. Now you can see the quote that I received has gone up slightly, and if I click on these details, I'll see that the $52 is now being applied. So that's level 3 of that maturity, which is real-time deployment. Now let's talk about the fourth level of this evolution, which is governance. Now many systems out there, this is as far as it goes, where you can execute business logic, you can externalize that logic, and you can deploy that logic in real time. However, that's simply not enough in most sophisticated applications. In our example, we may want to control who can change what. We may want to get impact analysis on what's happening. And we also may want to see what's changed between different versions of the project. In this example, I'm going to take a look at 2 different branches of the project to see what work has been done in parallel, see what the changes are, and to be able to merge them together as needed. So for example, I may compare this to the summer pricing rule branch, which has been worked on for the upcoming summer, and I may now see all the different changes visually side by side of what's been changed. I can also drill down on each of these to see specifically what's changed between the 2 different versions. In this case, you can see my change that I just made to this decision table from from $48 to $52. And these changes are highlighted, so I can easily see them, and I can granularly go through and copy them left, copy them right, or revert back to a previous version. I can also look at the natural language rules and see at a glance what's changed between the 2 different versions. Again, this is just one level of governance that we can apply in the Decision Center environment. Now the 5th level of this evolution is going to be our simulation and impact analysis. In this environment, I've created a simulation test script, which is going to run through all of my existing rules as if it were happening in an execution mode. And this is going to compare expected results with actual results. Now this can also be based on historical data. that is actually being executed in the runtime. So I'm going to go ahead and run this simulation. This is just simply using the rules that I have in this particular branch of the project. And the result is going to be a KPI system that I've set up that's going to display what the profit margin is going to be for each component of my rule. And you can see in each grouping, collision, comprehensive, liability, I have different statistics, and these are also broken down by vehicle type. Now for this example, this is only for New Jersey rules, but you can see I have a very large discrepancy on the comprehensive side, and this is for sedans. So what happens now if I need to make a correction to this? I'm going to go ahead and create a new rule that's going to add a surcharge for sedans in New Jersey. So I'm going to drill down to the folder in which I want to create this new rule and go ahead and create what we call an action rule, which is our natural language rule. And I'll give this rule a name, Special New Jersey Sedan Surcharge. I'm going to change the version to deployable. Now this versioning capability is also part of the governance and life cycle because I may only be able to create new rules, but I can only set a certain status. And then other users may have the ability to move a status from move a rule from one status to another. And then other users may have the ability to look at deployable rules and deploy them to the runtime. So you can set up a very natural life cycle and governance model out of the box. So now I'm ready to write my rule, and I can either use the point and click interface and get this contextual menu, or I can just simply type in the rule as I become more familiar with the environment. So the first condition is going to be the state of the residence of the driver as New Jersey, and the second condition is going to be that the type of the vehicle is a sedan. And the action to take on this is to add a surcharge to the rule. Now for this particular case, I'm going to add, let's say, an $18 surcharge to the quote. And I can also enter in a description, Special New Jersey Sedan Surcharge, and that's it. Now I can step through this and add different pieces of description and information to the rule. And what I'm going to do is actually add version description that I've created this brand new rule. And I'm done. So now I can go back to my simulation and simply rerun that same simulation with the same data to see now what the outcome would be if this rule were in place today. And it's going to run through those scenarios and come up with our KPIs. Now you can see that I made an overcorrection on this particular rule. I'm now basically gouging the customer, which may be what we intended. But for this example, I'm now going to go back and maybe correct that rule to bring that surcharge down slightly. So I can simply go in and edit that rule and just change that $18 to maybe $7. Save that, and let's run through our simulation one more time. And first I'm going to add a description to this particular version. So as we're making changes, we want to document those changes so that as someone's looking back to see what the history is, there's a very nice, understandable, intuitive audit trail. So let's go back and run our simulation. And again, you can see my two simulations at the bottom, and I'm going to run one more. And again, executing that same data so I can run these simulations over and over again to see what that impact is going to be. Now I can see that that surcharge is a little more appropriate. So now I'm ready to deploy this rule to the runtime. Now in a real world example, I would probably now promote this to a certain status and have someone else review that rule and go in and deploy it, but I'm acting as the administrator, so I'm going to go ahead and deploy the rule that I just created. And it's simply going to hot deploy that rule, and I can then go back to my website and run through that same scenario again. So let's go run through that quote again. This is the last time, I promise. We'll just step through with the same data just to show how quickly you can make those changes. And not only how we can make those changes, but how we can understand what the impact of those changes is going to be. So if you remember the value before, it was around 350 or so. And now we can see that that surcharge is being applied. The special sedan surcharge is $7. So that brings us to level 6 of this evolution, which is event processing. So let's say that I sit on this website for a certain period of time and nothing happens. I either close the web page, or maybe I just forget that I kept it open. I alt-tabbed over to Facebook and I was doing something else, and this website was left open. We want to start to detect certain actions or possibly non-actions, non-events that are happening, and respond to those in the appropriate way. Now in this example, if I wait long enough, in this case 1 minute, I'm going to get a reminder pop up that says, hey, you forgot to do something with this quote. We'll see at the top of the screen, a reminder has popped up. And this is basically just giving us some details around this quote, that we haven't done anything with it, we haven't accepted it, we haven't declined it, and we've basically correlated this event with other events that may have happened. Now this channel that we've pushed this to is obviously the same channel that we're working in, which is the website, but this is very easy to do in any other channel, such as a call center or a direct mail or marketing campaign. So that inaction is something that we can correlate and detect and then take action on. So essentially deciding when we need to do something, when we need to act. And this is what we call event processing. So what I'm going to do is take a look at where those event processing rules are taking place. And as you can imagine, we're going to maintain those in the same environment, in our decision center environment. And you can see that I have customer acquisition situations project. We can take a look at this, and this is where our correlation rules are taking place. So rather than the synchronous request reply rules that we saw earlier, these are our asynchronous sense and respond rules that are going to detect certain situations. In this case, the difference between this and a business rule is going to be that it's in response to an event, and it's going to be within a certain context, whether that's the customer ID or the full name or the cookie on the web page. And then after 1 minute, if it's a certain channel, and if we have not seen an event, either the accept or the decline, then we will take an action. In this case, we're going to send a reminder. But this action could be to send a note to the call center. It may be to trigger a process in BPM. It may be to send an email directly to the customer. The what to do is very easy to change and maintain, and essentially have a plug-and-play environment where you can choose which action to take depending on the correlation that occurs. And in this case, we're looking at events coming from a single source, from the website, but we can also correlate events from many different channels and many different sources. Now I want to spend the next 8 minutes or so talking about the new capabilities in the version 8 offering of operational decision management. This is going to focus in on the social aspect of decision platforms and the collaboration that is going to be needed in the next evolution of these decisioning environments. You can see now I'm logging into the Decision Center Business Console, which is going to display the same exact project information we saw in the Enterprise Console, but to do it in a very different way. You can see I can add my picture to my environment, and this is going to come into play as we start to get into some of the collaboration aspects. And I can also see what's happened recently, as well as get an on-the-fly stream of activity that's going on. I can drill down into my library to look at my different rule projects. In this case, my pricing project. You can see the recent activity that's happened. And now I have a very different view of what's happening in my decisioning project. I'm going to go ahead and search for the price table. And this price search is going to bring up many different components, many different assets. And I may want to narrow that search by type, by status, by date. Now, as projects become larger and larger, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of rules, this capability is going to become extremely important for managing and controlling these assets. So we'll go ahead and drill down on this pricing table, and you can see this is the exact same pricing table I had where I made my change from $48 to $52. Along the right-hand side, you can see the status and the properties of that rule. Now, another way to find assets is through the filter. So as I type in the filter box, it filters out any other assets that don't meet that criteria. So here's my special pricing rule where I applied the $7 surcharge. Now let's make another change to this surcharge. In this case, I'll drop the surcharge maybe to $4. And again, in a very intuitive way, rather than clicking the next buttons, I can add new comments directly into this input box as I'm saving the rule. And once that's saved, I can look at the timeline to see what the history of that rule has been. And not only can I view the history and the different components in that version, but I can click on any one of those versions to see exactly what the rule was at that state and potentially to revert it back to that state if need be. So now I'm going to switch hats, and I may get in trouble for this, but I'm going to step in as Phil. And let's pretend that Phil is my direct manager controlling the different assets in this project. So there you can see Phil's picture, and he also has a view of the stream activity and can see all the changes and additions that have been made to this project. And we can drill down and see the different versions that have been changed. So as Phil, I'm going to click on the version 1.2 that I just created and look at this rule and possibly make a comment on this rule. So in this case, I may decide that this rule is applying this surcharge too low and we need to raise it. So I've posted this comment as Phil, and now I'm going to switch back to Jared and go to my home page, to the stream, and see that that comment comes up immediately. And I can add my own comment in reply. So this real-time collaboration, we can start working together in a real-time environment and go in and make changes and see the changes and have that governance in place. Right? So I'm going to make a change to this rule. In this case, maybe increase it to $10, make another comment. And now I might also add a new comment that this rule's been changed. And we can look at the timeline as well to see each change that's being made. So I'll add a quick comment back to Phil that the change has been made. Go ahead and take a look. And then one last time I'll switch back over to Phil, and we can see that the change, you can see the comment is applied right there. He can directly from the stream access the rule and finally make his last comment. And now let's say that he also wants to add a new rule. So we're going to add a new SUV surcharge for New York. So he's added this comment into this stream, and we're going to create a brand new stream in order to create a new rule. So I'm going to pop back to Jared. So I'm now going to go and see the new stream. There's Phil's comment. And I'm now going to go create that new rule in my environment. So I'm going to drill down on my pricing project. And before I create a new rule, I'm going to take a snapshot. Now, snapshots are very important aspects of our version control capability because we can capture the state of a project simply by clicking a button and adding a comment. So we saw the timeline that captures the state of different versions of the individual assets, the individual rules, and the history of the project as it grows. So we can now click on the snapshots to see, in this case we only have one snapshot, but you can start to see the history of the project. So now let's create our last rule. In this case it's going to be a text-based rule as opposed to a table. I can give it a quick name, a special New York SUV surcharge. I choose the folder in which I want this rule to reside. In this case, it's going to be under the comprehensive surcharge, under the New York folder. And now we get a very similar editor to what we saw in the Enterprise console, where I can either click or type within this contextual menu. So in this case, the first thing is that the state of residence of the driver is going to be New York. And we can either type it in, or we can see that we've been given the option within the menu. And that the type of vehicle is going to be an SUV. Now, once we've chosen this type of vehicle in the state, we can apply the action. And previously we did a dollar surcharge. In this case, we'll add a percentage surcharge of 3%. So this will be a surcharge to the quote. And the reason is going to be that it's the special New York SUV surcharge. So let's go ahead and save this rule, add our comment. And this is, again, important for the version control and the audit trail. And once we do that, we may want to send one more note back to Phil to tell him that that change has been made. And now I'll switch hats one more time. You can see at the top right that I'm now Phil. And I can take a look at my stream to see that that rule has indeed been made. So there's my new New York SUV surcharge. I can click on it to review it and then add my comment back to Jared. So that does it for the demonstration. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.